I've been a forestry surveyor for 17 years. My job takes me into places most people will never see. Old growth stands that have been untouched for centuries. Remote timber parcels where the canopy is so thick that noon looks like dusk. I've encountered bears, mountain lions, and every kind of weather the Pacific Northwest can throw at you. I thought I'd seen everything these forests had to offer. My name is Victor Palmer. Before last October, I would have told you that Bigfoot was bullshit, a combination of tourist trap nonsense and misidentified wildlife. I'd driven past the Sasquatch museums and gift shops in Cascade towns, rolled my eyes at the wooden statues and bumper stickers. When my crew would tell stories around the fire about strange howls or massive tracks, I'd laugh it off. Bears, I'd say. Elk. Imagination. I don't laugh anymore. The Clearwater National Forest job seems straightforward. Assess a 4,000-acre parcel for potential timber sale, document stand composition, and map the terrain. 3 weeks in the backcountry with a crew of 4. We'd worked together before. Luca Ricci, my field tech with 8 years under his belt. Nora Quinn, a GIS specialist fresh from college, but sharp as they come. And Antoine Washington, who'd been surveying for 25 years and taught me half of what I know. We established base camp on October 12th, 12 miles from the nearest logging road. The Forest Service had warned us about a dead radio zone, something about the terrain blocking signals, but we had a satellite phone for emergencies. Cell service was non-existent, but that was standard. We were scheduled for daily check-ins at 1800 hours. The first day felt wrong. Antoine noticed it before anyone else. "Too quiet," he said while we were setting up the equipment tent. I'd noticed it too, but hadn't wanted to admit it. The forest was silent in a way that made your skin prickle. No bird calls, no squirrel chatter, just wind moving through the canopy and the distant sound of a creek. "Probably just the weather coming in," I said, checking the barometer. A front was approaching, but nothing severe. That night, Nora found the tracks. She'd wandered about 50 yards from camp to relieve herself and came back white-faced, gripping her flashlight. "There's something out there. Tracks. Big ones." We followed her back. The prints were in soft mud near the creek, 17 inches long, roughly humanoid but wider across the toe box. Deep impressions suggesting significant weight. 5 distinct toes with what looked like dermal ridges visible in the mud. "Bear," I said automatically, though I knew better. Bears don't leave prints like that, walking on 2 legs. Luca crouched next to one of the prints. "For how many steps? I count at least 12 in a straight line. Bears don't walk upright that long." Antoine was quiet, studying the tracks with his headlamp. He'd grown up in these mountains, learned forestry from his grandfather. "My grandfather told me stories about this area, said that Temekways lived here. Wild men of the forest, he called them. Told me some places you don't go." "Come on," I said, though my voice sounded uncertain even to me. "You're telling me you believe in Sasquatch?" He met my eyes. "I'm telling you my grandfather wasn't a liar, and these prints aren't from any bear I've ever seen." We returned to camp and I made a note in my field journal documenting the track measurements. 17 by 7 inches, depth approximately 2 inches in soft soil, stride length 48 inches. I told myself we'd look for more evidence in the morning. Around 2 a.m., the howls started. I've heard wolves. I've heard coyotes, mountain lions, even elk bugling during rut. This was none of those. It started low, almost below the range of hearing, making my chest vibrate. Then it rose to a shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the ridges, making it impossible to tell the direction. The sound lasted maybe 15 seconds. Then silence. "What the fuck was that?" Nora whispered from her tent. None of us answered. In the morning, we found more tracks circling our camp. Not one set, at least 3 different individuals based on the size variations. The largest measured 19 inches. They'd come within 20 feet of our tents. We also found something else. a tree structure about 100 yards downslope. 3 saplings had been broken, not cut, broken, about 7 feet off the ground and arranged in a tripod formation. The breaks showed fresh sap, maybe a day old. Storm damage? Nora suggested, though her voice betrayed her doubt. I examined the breaks. The saplings were 4 inches in diameter at the break point. You'd need serious force to snap them like that, and they'd been deliberately arranged. The odds of a storm creating this pattern were astronomical. "Let's just do our work and get out on schedule," I said, trying to sound authoritative. "We have a job to complete." But when I looked at Antoine, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. That afternoon, while we were running traverse lines through the north section, we heard wood knocking, sharp rhythmic cracks echoing through the forest like someone hitting a tree with a baseball bat. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. Then from a different direction, 2 knocks in response. Something was communicating, and it knew exactly where we were. I set up the trail camera on day 4. Not because I believed in Bigfoot. I told myself I was documenting bear activity for the Forest Service report, but I positioned it on a game trail about a quarter mile from camp, right where we'd found a cluster of massive tracks and more of those unsettling tree breaks. The camera was motion activated, infrared capable, and could record for 30 seconds per trigger. I didn't tell the crew what I was really hoping to capture. The incidents escalated that day. Around noon, while Nora and I were measuring dBH on a plot transect, rocks started hitting the trees around us. Not small pebbles, fist-sized stones thrown with enough force to embed bark fragments into the wood. They came from upslope, maybe 70 yards away in dense undergrowth where visibility was less than 20 feet. "Hey!" I shouted. "This isn't funny." Another rock whizzed past my head, missing by inches. I saw it clearly. Gray granite, probably 3 pounds, traveling in a flat trajectory that spoke of deliberate aim. We ran back to camp. Antoine and Luca had their own story. They'd been working a section along the ridge when they heard something large moving parallel to them through the forest. They never saw it clearly, just shapes between the trees, something massive keeping pace with them for nearly half a mile. When they stopped, it stopped. When they moved, it moved. "It was following us," Luca said, his hands shaking as he poured coffee from the camp kettle. "Not like a bear checking us out. This thing was herding us back toward camp." That night, I reviewed the field manual on handling aggressive wildlife encounters. Black bears. Make yourself large. Back away slowly. Never run. Mountain lions. Maintain eye contact. Throw objects. Fight back if attacked. There was no entry for what we were dealing with. The howls came again at 0200, closer this time. Multiple voices in what sounded like a conversation, rising and falling pitches, overlapping calls and responses. One of them sounded almost human, like someone screaming words in a language I couldn't understand. Nora was crying in her tent. I couldn't blame her. Morning of day 5, I checked the trail camera. My hands were shaking as I pulled the SD card and loaded it onto my laptop in the equipment tent. The others crowded around, drawn by some morbid need to see what we already knew was there. The first dozen triggers were deer, a few elk, 1 black bear. Then, time-stamped at 2147 the previous night, the camera captured it. The creature walked into frame from the left, moving with a fluid, purposeful gait that no bear could match. The infrared gave everything a ghostly quality, but the details were unmistakable. It stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair that was lighter on the chest and face. The face. God, the face was the worst part. Simultaneously human and utterly alien. A flat nose, pronounced brow ridge, eyes that caught the infrared and reflected it back like a cat's. But there was intelligence there. Those eyes were looking directly at the camera, directly at us through time. It stopped, tilted its head, then reached out with one massive hand and tore the camera from the tree. The final frame showed the creature's face filling the lens, examining the device. Then the screen went black. "Jesus Christ," Antoine whispered. "Jesus Christ, it knows. It knows what we're doing." Luca started laughing, high, hysterical peals that raised the hair on my neck. "We need to leave. Right now. Call for extraction." I grabbed the satellite phone. Dead battery, despite being fully charged the night before. I checked the backup, also dead. The solar charger had been torn from the equipment line where we'd strung it between trees. We found it 50 yards away, crushed like someone had stepped on it. "They disabled our communications," Nora said, her voice remarkably steady. "They don't want us calling for help." I tried to think. 12 miles to the logging road. 2 days of hard hiking with full packs over rough terrain. Or we could stay in camp, hope the daily check-in prompted a search when we didn't respond. But that was 13 hours away, and we'd only miss one check-in before they'd likely assume equipment failure. "We hike out at first light," I decided. "Full packs, emergency gear only. We move fast and we move together. Nobody separates for any reason." Around 1500 hours, the screaming started. Not howls, screams. Human-like, but wrong, coming from at least 4 different directions simultaneously. The sounds moved through the forest in a coordinated pattern, sometimes close enough that I could hear branches breaking, sometimes distant enough to make me question if I'd heard anything at all. They were surrounding us. "Why are they doing this?" Nora asked. Her face was pale, eyes too wide. "What do they want?" I didn't have an answer, but I remembered something Antoine's grandfather had supposedly said. "Some places you don't go." We'd come into their territory, mapped it, measured it, assessed it for destruction. We'd treated this forest like it belonged to us. Maybe they were teaching us differently. At 1800 hours, 3 of them revealed themselves. They stood at the tree line about 80 yards from camp, 3 massive figures silhouetted against the darkening sky. The largest was in the center, flanked by 2 slightly smaller ones. They didn't move, didn't vocalize. They just stood there, watching us, letting us know we were trapped. I pulled out my field notebook and sketched them, documenting heights, proportions, positions. My surveyor's brain needed the familiar ritual of measurement and observation. Central figure approximately 9.5 feet tall, shoulders 4 feet across. Muscle mass visible even at this distance. Arms longer than human proportions, hanging to mid-thigh. Covered in dark brown hair that lightened around the face. "They look like a family," Luca said quietly. "Male, female, juvenile maybe." As if responding to his words, the central figure raised one arm and hurled something toward us. A rock the size of a cantaloupe arced through the air and crashed into the equipment tent, tearing through the nylon and destroying our remaining survey instruments. Warning delivered, they melted back into the forest. We didn't sleep that night. We sat around the fire, feeding it constantly despite our dwindling wood supply, holding useless bear spray and survival knives that seemed pathetically inadequate. Every sound made us flinch. Every shadow between the trees could be death approaching. Around 0400, Antoine told us what his grandfather had really said about this area. He called it a nursery ground. Said that Samequis bring their young here, teach them to hunt, to survive. Said his own father had accidentally walked into it once during a storm. Saw the females with infants, juveniles learning to make tools. Said he ran and never went back. Warned the tribe to stay away. "And you didn't think to mention this before we came out here?" Luca's voice was sharp with anger and fear. "I thought it was just stories. I thought..." Antoine's voice broke. "I thought my grandfather was just telling tales. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." As dawn broke on day 6, we prepared to run. We started the hike out at 0630, moving as fast as the terrain allowed. I kept us together in a tight group, me on point, Antoine sweeping the rear, Nora and Luca between us. We each carried emergency packs with minimal gear, abandoning most of the survey equipment and supplies. The forest was still silent. No birds, no insects, nothing but our ragged breathing and boots on the trail. They let us walk for 2 hours before the attack came. The first rock struck without warning, a blur of motion from the right that caught Luca in the shoulder and spun him completely around. He went down hard, crying out in pain. I rushed to him as more rocks began to rain down from multiple directions. Precision throws, not random. One shattered a tree trunk inches from Nora's head. Another would have killed me if I hadn't stumbled over a root at exactly the right moment. "Move! Move!" Antoine was shouting, trying to pull Luca to his feet. The shoulder was dislocated, maybe broken. Luca's face was gray with pain and shock. We got him up between us and stumbled forward, rocks continuing to crash through the canopy around us. They weren't trying to kill us yet. They were hurting us, pushing us off the main trail and deeper into a narrow ravine where the undergrowth was thick and the walls steep, into a killing ground. I realized it too late. The ravine bottlenecked ahead, narrowing to maybe 15 feet across with walls too steep to climb. We were being funneled into a dead end. "Back! We have to go back!" But when I turned, one of them was standing in the ravine behind us, blocking our retreat. It was the large male we'd seen the night before. Up close, it was more terrifying than any camera could capture. 9.5 feet of corded muscle covered in dark brown hair. The face was a nightmare collision of human and ape. Intelligent eyes under a heavy brow, flat nose, lips that could have been human pulled back to show yellowed teeth. The smell hit us like a physical force. Musky, rotten, overwhelming. It took one step forward. We scrambled back. Another one appeared on the ravine wall above us. The female, I thought, slightly smaller but no less dangerous. She was holding a branch the size of a baseball bat, gripping it with clear intent. We were trapped between them. "Bear spray!" I fumbled for the canister on my belt, knowing even as I did it that it was futile. But what else did we have? The male charged. I've never seen anything that big move that fast. 1 second it was 15 feet away. The next it was among us. It grabbed Antoine with one hand, just reached out and seized him by the torso like he was a doll. Antoine screamed, his survival knife flashing as he tried to stab the creature's arm. The blade probably hit. I saw the motion connect, but the creature didn't even flinch. It lifted Antoine off his feet and hurled him against the ravine wall. The sound of his body hitting rock will haunt me until I die. A wet, terrible crack that spoke of bones breaking and organs rupturing. Antoine slid down the wall and didn't move. "Run!" I was screaming, spraying bear spray at the creature even though it was clearly ineffective. The female had dropped down into the ravine behind us. We were surrounded. Nora and I grabbed Luca and pulled him forward, crashing through undergrowth in pure panic. Behind us, I heard sounds that didn't make sense. Not snarling or roaring like an animal, but something worse. Sounds that were almost like speech, guttural and deep, communicating back and forth as they coordinated. The ravine opened into a small clearing. We burst through, gasping, bleeding from a dozen scratches. I risked a look back. The male was crouched over Antoine's body, not eating, examining. It touched Antoine's face almost gently, turned his head back and forth as if puzzled by what it had done. Then it looked up at us, and I saw something in its eyes that made my blood run cold. Not animal rage or hunting instinct. Curiosity. It was curious about what we were. We ran. The forest became a blur of green and brown, branches whipping our faces, roots trying to trip us. Luca was sobbing with pain, barely able to move, but propelled by pure terror. We crashed through a stream, slipped on wet rocks, kept going. Wood knocks echoed through the trees. 3 from the left, 2 from the right, 1 from ahead. They were flanking us, communicating our position to each other, coordinating the hunt. "We can't outrun them," Nora gasped. "Victor, we can't." A juvenile, smaller than the adults but still over 7 feet tall, stepped onto the trail ahead of us. This was the offspring, I realized, the one we'd seen with the adult pair. Its hair was lighter, face less developed. It was younger, maybe adolescent in whatever passed for years in their species. It was learning to hunt. I grabbed a fallen branch and swung it like a bat, screaming incoherently. The juvenile stepped back, tilted its head in that disturbing way they had. Then its mother appeared behind it, placing one massive hand on the young one's shoulder. Teaching moment. I was the lesson. The female vocalized, a series of grunts and barks that the juvenile seemed to understand. It nodded, actually nodded like a human child receiving instruction, and moved to circle around us. Behind us, I heard the male crashing through the undergrowth. We were surrounded again, caught in a triangle with nowhere to go. "Climb!" I shoved Nora toward the nearest large fir. "Get up the tree!" We scrambled up the trunk, finding handholds in the rough bark, pulling ourselves higher. Luca couldn't use his damaged arm, but somehow found the strength to climb with his legs in one hand, driven by desperation. We got maybe 20 feet up before the first creature reached the base. The male. It looked up at us, assessing. Then it started to climb. I'd assumed they couldn't climb, that trees would be safe. I was wrong. The creature came up after us with fluid grace, finding handholds effortlessly, moving with the confidence of something that had lived in these trees its entire life. Its massive weight made the trunk sway and groan. "Higher!" But there was nowhere higher to go. The branches were getting too thin to support our weight, already bending dangerously. The creature stopped about 10 feet below us. It could come higher, I realized. It was choosing not to. Instead, it began to shake the tree. The motion was violent, deliberate. The entire fir swayed back and forth, branches whipping. Luca lost his grip and fell, screaming. He hit several branches on the way down, each impact producing sounds no human body should make. He landed at the base of the tree, tried to crawl, and stopped moving. The female approached Luca's body. Unlike the male with Antoine, she didn't examine him. She grabbed him by the ankle and dragged him into the undergrowth like a rag doll. The male was still shaking our tree. Nora was holding on above me, sobbing, her arms wrapped around the trunk. I could feel my own grip weakening, muscles screaming from the sustained effort of holding on while the tree tried to throw us off. "I'm sorry," I called up to her. "I'm so sorry I brought you here." The shaking stopped. The male descended halfway down the trunk and leaped to the ground with impossible grace. It stood below us, the female joining it with the juvenile between them. All three looked up at us. Then, as if satisfied with their work, they turned and walked away into the forest. The wood knocks started again, but more distant now, moving away from us. Were they leaving, or just giving us hope before coming back? We stayed in that tree for 3 hours, too terrified to climb down, too exhausted to hold on much longer. Finally, as afternoon light filtered through the canopy, we descended. Antoine and Luca were gone. Not dead. Gone. The blood trails led into the forest in different directions, but I wasn't going to follow them. I knew what we'd find. Or rather, what we wouldn't find. The creatures had taken the bodies. Nora and I stumbled onward, heading roughly west toward where the logging road should be. She hadn't spoken since Luca died. Her eyes were empty, her movements mechanical. We walked until we couldn't walk anymore, then collapsed against a fallen log as darkness fell. No fire. We didn't dare. No shelter. Just two people waiting to see if morning would come. In the darkness, we heard them. Distant howls and wood knocks, forming a perimeter around us. They knew exactly where we were. They were letting us know. We weren't escaping. We were being played with. Dawn came with fog so thick I could barely see Nora huddled next to me. We'd somehow survived the night through a combination of fear-induced insomnia and the ambient temperature staying just above hypothermia range. My legs were numb, my throat raw from suppressing screams every time a branch cracked in the darkness. "We have to move," I croaked. Maybe 6 more miles to the logging road. Nora didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on something beyond the fog, beyond the forest, beyond anything I could see. Shock was setting in. I grabbed her shoulder, shook her gently. "Nora, stay with me. We're getting out." "They're still out there," she whispered. "They're waiting." She was right. As the fog thinned, I caught movement between the trees, shapes that resolved into the familiar outline of the male, then dissolved back into shadow. They were tracking us, sometimes visible, sometimes not. Psychological warfare. They wanted us to know we were being hunted. We moved west, or what I hoped was west. Without GPS, without my compass, lost somewhere in yesterday's chaos, I was navigating by instinct and the sun's position when I could see it through the canopy. The terrain was getting steeper, which was right. The logging road followed a ridge line. If we could just make it to higher ground. The first scream came at 9:30. It was so close that I felt the sound in my chest, a shriek that started low and rose to a pitch that made my ears ring. It came from directly behind us. When I spun around, the female was standing 30 feet away, arms raised above her head, mouth open in that terrible vocalization. Display behavior, some distant part of my brain noted. Intimidation, making itself look bigger. We ran. The forest erupted in sound, wood knocks from 3 directions, howls answering howls, crashing movement through the undergrowth. They were coordinating again, boxing us in, driving us like prey animals. Which, I realized with awful clarity, was exactly what we were. Nora tripped over a root and went down hard. I pulled her up, felt something warm and wet on her forehead. Blood, but not much. Head wounds bled worse than they were. Keep moving. A rock the size of my head crashed into a tree 6 inches to my left, sending bark fragments into my face. Another whistled past my right ear. They weren't missing. They were herding, controlling our direction with precision throws. We were being pushed south, away from the logging road, deeper into wilderness. "No," I gasped. "We go west. We have to go west." I angled our flight back toward what I hoped was the right direction. Immediately, the rock barrage intensified. One caught Nora in the hip, spinning her around. She screamed and fell. I tried to lift her, but she was dead weight, curled around the pain. 2 juveniles, I hadn't seen the second one before, stepped out of the undergrowth ahead of us. Not the same juvenile from yesterday. These were younger, maybe 6 feet tall, their movements less coordinated. Adolescents, learning to hunt by watching the adults work. Behind us, the female approached. She was carrying something. As she got closer, I recognized it with a surge of nausea. Luca's survey vest. She was wearing it draped over one shoulder, mockingly imitating human clothing. It was a message. A taunt. "Look what we took from you." Nora saw it and started screaming, high, wordless shrieks that devolved into hysterical laughter. She was breaking, fracturing under the sustained terror. I slapped her, hating myself for it, trying to snap her back. "Run," I whispered. "Nora, please, run with me." She looked at me with eyes that had already given up. "It doesn't matter. We're dead. We've been dead since we got here. They're just making it last." A juvenile approached her, moving with the cautious curiosity of a predator investigating interesting prey. It reached out one hand, touched her hair, pulled back when she flinched. The female vocalized, that same teaching sound I'd heard before. The juvenile was learning about us. I pulled my survival knife, knowing it was useless but unable to just stand there. "Get away from her." The female looked at me. Our eyes met. In that moment, I understood something that made the last shreds of my sanity want to flee. She was intelligent, not animal smart, not instinct-driven. She was thinking, making decisions, experimenting with us to see how we'd react. We weren't just prey. We were a teaching opportunity for her offspring. She made a sound, a grunt or bark, and both juveniles stepped back. Then she simply turned and walked away, her children following. She disappeared into the forest, taking Luca's vest with her. "Why didn't she kill us?" Nora whispered. I didn't have an answer, but the wood knocks continued, still surrounding us. They were giving us a reprieve, not setting us free. The hunt wasn't over. We limped onward. Nora's hip was badly bruised, but nothing broken. We had no food, no water except what we could scoop from streams, no shelter. My watch said it was 11:45 hours. If we'd made the scheduled check-in yesterday, search and rescue might be mobilizing now. They'd check our last known position, find the camp, see the destruction. Would they believe what had happened? Or would they think we'd been attacked by bears, scattered in panic, died from exposure? By 1400 hours, we were hallucinating. I kept seeing Antoine walking beside me, asking if I'd filed the traverse data properly. Nora was talking to someone named Jessica, probably her mother, apologizing for something I couldn't follow. That's when we found the structure. It was in a natural hollow between two ridges, a kind of nest or lair constructed from broken trees, woven branches, and piles of leaves. The engineering was sophisticated, creating a sheltered space maybe 20 feet across. And in the center, arranged with clear deliberation, were bones. Human bones. Old ones, yellowed and weathered, but unmistakably human. Skulls, femurs, rib cages, at least 4 different individuals based on what I could see. Some showed marks that could have been teeth. Others were cracked open, the marrow extracted. "Oh God," Nora whispered. "Oh God, they eat us." But that wasn't what horrified me most. What froze me was the arrangement. The bones were organized by type, sorted into piles. Deliberate, methodical. This wasn't just feeding behavior. This was an ossuary, a place they brought their dead prey. Or maybe they're dead. We backed away slowly, trying not to disturb anything. If this was a sacred place, and given the intelligence these creatures demonstrated, they might have concepts like sacred. We didn't want to trigger some territorial response. Too late. The male erupted from the undergrowth behind the structure, roaring. An actual roar like a bear, but deeper, resonating through my chest cavity. We'd invaded their sanctum, violated something important. The playful cat-and-mouse game was over. It charged. We ran with the last reserves of energy our bodies could provide, legs pumping mechanically, lungs burning. I didn't look back. The sound of pursuit was enough. Massive footfalls, branches snapping, the wet breathing of something that could run for hours without tiring. Nora went down. I don't know if she tripped or if her hip finally gave out, but she fell hard and skidded across pine needles. I stopped, turned back for her. The male was 10 feet away and closing. "Go!" Nora screamed at me. "Victor, go!" The creature grabbed her by the leg, pulled her toward it effortlessly, despite her desperate clawing at the ground. She was still screaming my name as it lifted her, still reaching for me as if I could somehow save her. I ran. I'm not proud of it. I'm not looking for forgiveness. But I ran while Nora's screams followed me through the forest, growing more distant, and then cutting off abruptly in a way that told me exactly what had happened. I ran until my legs wouldn't work anymore, until I collapsed in a creek bed and lay there shaking, waiting for death to find me. It didn't come. The forest was silent again except for my ragged breathing and the sound of water flowing over rocks. They'd taken everyone but me. The question was, why had they let me live? I reached the logging road at 0400 the next morning, after walking through the entire night, navigation by starlight through gaps in the canopy, following the slope of the land, driven by a survival instinct I didn't know I possessed. The road was empty, dark, stretching in both directions like a promise and a lie. I stumbled down it heading east, toward where I thought the Forest Service station should be, 23 miles away. But it was flat, and there was moonlight, and I was alive. I walked for 4 hours before the headlights found me. A Forest Service truck, 2 rangers inside looking alarmed as this filthy, bleeding wreck of a person staggered into their high beams. They pulled me into the truck, wrapped me in an emergency blanket, tried to give me water I couldn't swallow. "What happened?" the driver kept asking. "Jesus, what happened to you?" I told them about my crew, gave them the coordinates for our camp, told them we'd been attacked by... I hesitated. What could I say that they'd believe? "Bears," I finally said. "Aggressive bears. They killed the others, dragged them off. We need search and rescue. We need..." "Easy, easy," the other ranger said, keying his radio. "We'll get help. Just stay calm." They took me to the station, where I was examined by a paramedic, given fluids, treated for exposure and dehydration, and countless lacerations. My story was taken down by 3 different people: Forest Service, county sheriff, even a state wildlife officer who asked detailed questions about the bear behavior. "That's unusual," he said, frowning at his notes. "Predatory behavior by black bears is extremely rare. And you said there were multiple animals?" "At least 3 adults," I said, then stopped myself. How could I explain what I'd actually seen? They found our camp that afternoon. The helicopter crew reported extensive damage, evidence of large animal presence, blood traces. No bodies. The search continued for 3 days, covering a 10-mile radius. They found Antoine's jacket caught on a branch, one of Luca's boots, Nora's backpack, torn open and contents scattered. No bodies. No explanation for the tracks they must have found. No way to reconcile what I was telling them with the physical evidence. On day 4, a man in a suit visited me at the hospital. He said he was with the Forest Service, but his credentials looked federal. Maybe Bureau of Land Management. Maybe something else. "Mr. Palmer," he said, sitting down beside my bed. "I've reviewed your statement. I have some questions about the wildlife you encountered." "Bears," I said automatically. "Black bears." "Your crew found tracks, 17 inches long, bipedal gait pattern. That's not a bear, Mr. Palmer." I stared at him. He stared back, waiting. "I know what I saw," I finally said. "I'm sure you do." He pulled out a folder, opened it. Inside were photographs. My trail camera photographs, pulled from my laptop at the camp. The creature caught in infrared, staring at the camera. "This is evidence of a known species, one we've been monitoring in this region for 40 years. "Monitoring." My voice was flat. "You knew they were there." "The Clearwater area is habitat for a breeding population. Your crew was assigned that sector by mistake. A clerical error that should never have happened. You weren't supposed to be there." He gathered the photographs. "These images are classified. Your statement will reflect a bear attack. Your crew died from wildlife encounter and exposure. You survived through skill and luck." "That's not what happened." "That's exactly what happened." He stood. "3 of your colleagues are dead, Mr. Palmer. Their families deserve closure. The official cause of death is animal attack. If you contradict that, if you pursue this publicly, you'll face federal charges for releasing classified information about protected species on federal land. Do you understand?" I understood that my crew had died for nothing, that the government knew these things existed and had let us walk into their territory anyway, that the truth would be buried under paperwork and lies. "What are they?" I asked. "Unknown higher primate, possibly descended from Gigantopithecus. Highly intelligent, highly territorial, and extremely dangerous when their habitat is threatened. They've been here longer than we have, and we've learned, the hard way, to leave them alone." "So, you just let people die?" "We try to prevent encounters. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, people end up where they shouldn't be. Like you." He walked to the door, paused. "You're alive because they chose to let you live. One survivor to tell the story, spread fear, keep others away. It's happened before." Take the warning, Mr. Palmer. Don't go back." He left. I never learned his name. The memorial service for my crew was 2 weeks later. Closed caskets with nothing inside. I gave a eulogy, saying all the things you're supposed to say about good people taken too soon. Antoine's daughter cried on my shoulder. Nora's mother asked me if she suffered. I lied and said it was quick. The Forest Service closed the Clearwater sector for ecological assessment. The timber sale was canceled. I received a settlement that felt like hush money, because that's what it was. I signed papers agreeing never to discuss the details of what happened. Then I went home and tried to forget. It's been 14 months since Clearwater. I live in Portland now, as far from the forest as I can get while still being in the Northwest. My apartment is on the 14th floor of a building where the only wildlife is pigeons on the balcony. I work as a consultant now, reviewing survey data from my laptop. I don't go into the field anymore. I can't. The nightmares come 3 or 4 times a week, always the same. I'm back in that ravine, watching the male lift Antoine, hearing that terrible cracking sound. Or I'm in the tree, feeling it shake, watching Luca fall. Or I'm running while Nora screams my name behind me, begging me to help her, and I keep running. I wake up screaming. The neighbors have complained twice. I started seeing a therapist in January. Dr. Sarah Chen specializes in PTSD from wilderness trauma. I told her about the bears. She's helping me process the guilt, the survivor's shame, the hypervigilance that makes me check every shadow, every dark corner. But I can't tell her the truth. The NDA I signed wasn't just legal, it was a cage around reality. So I lie to my therapist the way I lie to everyone. And the lies don't help because I know what I saw. I monitor the news obsessively. 3 hikers missing near Mount Hood. Bodies never found. A hunting party in Idaho. 2 dead, 1 survivor raving about ape men before recanting his story. A forestry crew in Northern California refusing to return to a work site, citing safety concerns that the company won't specify. Patterns. The same patterns. People going into remote forests and not coming back. Survivors who change their stories. Entire areas closed without explanation. I started downloading reports from the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, reading posts on Bigfoot research forums. Most of it is garbage, tourist trap nonsense and misidentified bears. But buried in the noise are stories like mine. People who encountered something in deep wilderness, who watched it kill their companions, who barely escaped and were told to stay silent. We find each other sometimes, in coded language on obscure message boards. We share our stories in fragments, never using real names, always aware that someone might be monitoring. There's a woman in British Columbia who lost her husband to them, a game warden in Montana who shot one and watched it walk away, bullet apparently ineffective. A biologist who found a breeding site and had his research confiscated by federal agents. We're a community of silenced witnesses, bearing truth that no one wants to hear. Last week, I got a call from my old boss at the Forest Service. There's a survey job opening up. Remote site in Olympic National Forest. 3 weeks. Good pay. "We'd love to have you back, Victor. You're one of the best we've ever had." I said I'd think about it and hung up. I can't go back. Even the thought of being under a forest canopy again makes my hands shake. The smell of pine sap triggers panic attacks. I hear wood knocks in the sound of construction sites. Every homeless person I see in Portland's downtown makes me flinch, my brain processing height and build before rational thought catches up. But here's what keeps me up at night. More than the nightmares, more than the guilt. I've been reviewing topographical surveys of the Pacific Northwest, overlaying them with missing persons reports, historical Sasquatch sightings, and forest closure orders. The pattern is clear once you know what you're looking for. There are territories, specific watersheds, specific mountain ranges, where they live, where they breed, where they've been for thousands of years, long before we arrived. And we keep pushing into their land. Logging operations, hiking trails, ski resorts, rural development. Every year, we take more. Every year, the territories shrink, and every year, more people go missing in the wilderness. The creatures in Clearwater weren't random monsters. They were a family protecting a nursery ground from invasive threats. We were the invaders. We were the threat. And they responded the way any intelligent species would when defending its young, with coordinated violence and strategic efficiency. I think about the male, examining Antoine's body with that curious gentleness. About the female wearing Luca's vest, teaching her children about us. About the juvenile watching Nora with that tilted head curiosity before its mother called it away. They're not mindless killers. They're intelligent beings defending their territory from an encroaching enemy. An enemy that cuts down their forests, drives out their prey, and sends survey crews to map their homes for destruction. That's what the man in the suit understood. That's why they monitor instead of study, observe instead of protect. Because if the public knew these creatures existed, really knew, with proof and documentation, what would happen? Maybe there would be conservation efforts, maybe there would be protection, but more likely, there would be hunting parties, trophy seekers, researchers capturing them for study, more territorial conflicts, more deaths on both sides. The creatures would become endangered, studied, contained, or hunted to extinction. So the government keeps them classified, lets them exist in their shrinking territories, cleans up the incidents when ignorant humans wander too close. And people like me, the survivors, we stay silent because we signed papers and because, deep down, we understand something terrible. They were here first, and maybe they deserve to stay. But that doesn't help me sleep. It doesn't stop the nightmares or ease the guilt. It doesn't bring Antoine back, or Luca, or Nora. They died because we made a mistake, because a clerical error put us in the wrong place, because we didn't listen to the warnings that have existed for generations. I keep the trail camera photographs on an encrypted drive, the video of that creature looking directly at the camera, intelligence gleaming in its eyes. Someday, maybe, I'll release them. When I'm too old to care about NDAs or federal charges. When the guilt outweighs the fear. Or maybe I'll take them to my grave, another silent witness carrying truth that the world isn't ready to hear. If you're reading this, if you're planning a trip into remote wilderness, Pacific Northwest, Northern California, Idaho, Montana, anywhere with deep forest and limited human presence, understand what you're walking into. Those old legends, those indigenous warnings, those tourist trap Bigfoot stories. They're not fiction. They're truth wrapped in plausibility denial, reality disguised as folklore. Look for the signs. Massive tracks that are too human to be bare. Tree structures that can't be explained by weather. Howls that don't match any known animal. Wood knocks echoing through the forest. And most of all, that feeling of being watched, the hair rising on your neck, the instinct that says something is wrong here. Trust that instinct. Leave immediately. Don't investigate. Don't take photographs. Don't try to prove anything. Just leave and consider yourself lucky if they let you. Because they're real. They exist. And they're far more dangerous than any bear or mountain lion because they think, they plan, they remember. And they've learned that the best way to protect their territories is to make sure very few humans leave to tell the tale. I survived because I was meant to. A warning sent out into the world. Someone to spread fear and keep others away. I'm spreading it now. Stay out of their territory. Stay out of deep forest. And if you see signs of them, run. Don't look back. Don't try to save your companions. Just run and pray they're feeling merciful. Because in Clearwater Forest, I learned what we really are. We're not the apex predators we think we are. We're not even close. And somewhere in the deep wilderness, in territories we've marked for logging and development and recreation, they're watching. They're waiting. And they're protecting something we'll never fully understand. Something they'll kill to defend. I know, because I watched them do it. And I'll carry that knowledge until the day I die. a silent witness to a truth the world refuses to believe.